In case for some reason you guys have not heard the news, it has been announced from the official everything, it's not a hoax. Akira Toriyama, the creator of Dragon Ball, has passed away. And I don't say this lightly, and I look outside of just my own personal preference for stories, that I would put Toriyama on the same legendary status, like actually using the word legendary. I'd put him on the same level as Tolkien. I'd put him on the same level as Stan Lee. I'd put him on the same level as George Lucas, in the sense that he created a work of fiction and a world and characters that defined generations and inspired countless amounts of people and literally changed the world. And I am not even like exaggerating when I say that. Dragon Ball literally changed the world in so many ways. And, think about how many of us would not even be into anime if not for Dragon Ball Z. I don't know how it is in other countries and stuff, but I know that in the West and in America in particular, it is because of the success of Dragon Ball Z that anime became more accessible to people and more financially viable to companies, and more were produced and brought over and dubbed, and it basically caused this explosion of anime. Anime was a very underground thing, for a while. But when Dragon Ball Z came over here, and it was my introduction to Toriyama. It was the introduction of my entire generation. I'm a millennial, but even my generation and the younger generation below me, we were all pretty much introduced to Toriyama through Dragon Ball Z, and inadvertently introduced to anime in general through Dragon Ball Z, or at least the potential of what anime could be. And obviously the anime was an adaptation of the manga. He wrote and drew the manga, but it all comes from that original source material, and it's because of the story and the characters that made it so powerful. And it changed lives. And I say that, and you have so much evidence to show that that is true. You have evidence in the world of manga and anime to begin with. You have so many creators and artists that have verbatimly stated that Toriyama was their biggest influence, but you can see it. You can see it in shonen. You can see it in story structure. You can see it in the way, the pure character that Goku was, that original Goku character, has been redone over and over again. The trials, the struggles, the tribulations, everything, transformations, whatever it is. So much of it comes from Dragon Ball. It inspired storytellers even outside of the world in anime and manga. This is not an isolated thing. It is not just anime fans and anime nerds, comic book writers, novelists, movie makers. So many people were inspired by Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z to make their own thing. Even in the world of video games, which I'm not as familiar with, but Dragon Quest and Chrono Trigger and all that stuff that he had involvement with, even that inspired like a plethora of like those styles of games. And you can see it beyond that, beyond storytelling in general, and beyond just what people have written and drawn, and how many people he inspired to pick up a pen or to start writing their own stories, or as a kid drawing their own comics, all that kind of stuff, right? Even outside of that, it inspired so many people to persevere, to push forward, to face unstoppable odds, to start training. How many people that are involved with sports or weightlifting or martial arts got their inspiration directly from Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, and that's the reason why they work out. I can't tell you how many times I've been in the gym, and if I'm not listening to like Dragon Ball Z related stuff, I'm thinking about it in some way. I think about, reaching that next level and becoming a Super Saiyan and overcoming your limits and pushing yourself even further. And the motivational aspects of Dragon Ball are so powerful and so profound that it's the reason why people do things. It's been the reason why people push to overcome in their own lives. And I can tell you that from personal experience and a bunch of anecdotal experiences. And if you just look online at the outpouring of love and admiration for this person, and the world they created, to me, not only is it just incredibly impressive and rare, by the way, like very few human beings will create something, like lots of people create art, and all art's important, but very few will be able to touch as many people as Toriyama did. Very, very few. Lost my train of thought. I'm sorry, but I want to do this all in one video. But beyond all of that, you can see just doesn't matter, what country, what language that you watch Dragon Ball in or discover Dragon Ball, it is everywhere. You look online at the outpouring of love. And it is just insane. Goku is a character that is within the zeitgeist of humanity. You always joke about the Goku versus Superman thing. Goku, I think at this point, maybe like 20 years ago, not so much. I think at this point, Goku is just as well known around the world as Superman, as something that iconic that was created. But also, I want to get a little bit personal, and I want to be serious in this video, because this is a big deal. It's like, I know it's a famous person that I've never met and you've never met, and all of that, but it's important to recognize the power of art. And this is why I say art is important, because it's not just a flashy story. You think about the reasons why people are drawn to Dragon Ball, right? You think about it, if you don't know anything about it and you just see it, I'm sure a lot of parents felt this way in the 90s. You just see the flashy colors, you just see the violence, you see people yelling and all that stuff. You don't really get it from an outside perspective. But when you were a kid, and even into adulthood, and that's why I say, I put a post up that said, not only did Dragon Ball define my childhood, but it really defined my life. And I want to get into a little bit of why, but I don't want this video to be too long as well. Because, when I was a kid, I'll keep this very brief, but when I was a kid, things were very difficult. I didn't have a lot of friends. I didn't have brothers or sisters. I was relentlessly bullied and picked on in school for being small, for being weak, for being short, for being a nerd, everything you could think of, right? And it didn't get terribly physical. I wasn't like beat up, but it was constant like harassment and bullying and being looked down upon, and it was every day. It was every day, just constantly being made fun of, And I didn't have much to lift me up, right? But when I started watching Dragon Ball Z, which I discovered randomly, I think it was like it used to be on at like 6:30 in the morning or something, before I found it on Toonami. And it blew me away. It was so different than anything else ever experienced at the time, because a lot of cartoons and stuff geared for kids were very episodic. And it was the same thing over and over. And Dragon Ball Z had this long, ongoing storyline that was always continued, and there was time jumps. You got to see characters grow up. You literally got to grow up with Gohan. It was so different than anything. There's now stuff like that is a dime a dozen, especially when it comes to anime. But at the time, there was nothing else like that, right? But I watched this show as a kid. And yeah, of course, I was drawn to the flashy colors and the fight scenes and the yelling, but there was something about it that really hit me deeply to my core, and I understand what it is now as an adult, and it's being able to see these characters constantly face these indomitable odds where by every right and purpose they should lose, but they don't give up, particularly Goku. And Vegeta has a great storyline. There's so many characters with great storylines, but like, the point is, I saw these characters push themselves. They motivated themselves. They would train. They would beat the crap out of themselves, pushing themselves to get better, realizing that there is no limit, or the limit that there is, you can overcome if you try hard enough, if you push hard enough. Frieza was a bully, right? Cell was a bully. And seeing these characters just not bow down to these odds and push themselves and train. It changed something in me when I was a kid that still remains to this day, that I truly believe that if I work hard enough, if I train hard enough, if I train my body, if I train my mind, if I push, then I can overcome this. I can do this. You know, or at least I'm gonna fucking try to my last goddamn breath. And that's what that show did. You know, there were so many times as a kid, you know, I would just feel so weak and I would feel so powerless and I would feel just like, I would feel just so insignificant, you know? They're like these other kids, they're taller, they're stronger, they push me around, you know, they call me names and all that stuff. But then I would look at like Goku and I would look at Gohan and I would look at these characters that like didn't take that shit. And even if they did get beat down, they would train and get stronger, right? They didn't accept that. They didn't accept that as what it was. They knew they could be better. You know, and I would see Vegeta training in the gravity and it would be so difficult. And he's trying so hard to reach Super Saiyan. And when he finally does it, you know, it's just like this momentous thing. You would see Gohan, who's like such a pure character. And, you know, when he finally had to accept the situation and rise up against Cell, like, these are things that, you know, you see him in everything. You see him in so many different kinds of fiction now, but like at the time, there was nothing like that. And Dragon Ball Z is the reason I started standing up for myself. It actually is. It's the reason I decided to take martial arts classes when I was like, 12, 13 years old, however old I was when I started it. Like the reason I wanted to do martial arts and learn to defend myself and get stronger is because of what Toriyama created. The reason to this day, when I'm in the gym and I'm lifting weights, I think about Dragon Ball Z. I don't care how fucking cheesy it is. I do. Even today, today it was really hard to train because I was thinking about this and, you know, I did like my workout that I wanted to do and then I said, I'm doing one more set for Toriyama. Like, this set isn't even about, I was doing squats too. Like, I don't even want to do legs. And I'm like, this next set, it's not even for me. I'm done with my workout. This one's for Toriyama, you know? It's so just insane. And I'm just one person. But that's the thing. That's my point. So this is like to come back full circle. This is my point. Is like, that's what he did for me. I'm one person. There are millions of people he did the same thing for. Legendary. Legendary.